But we are doing this a little bit differently this week. We're doing it on a Thursday instead of a Wednesday, and we don't have Tim here, but who we do have is, if you'll give me just a second here, I almost forgot to get us live on Facebook. So if you're just joining us now on Facebook and for the Facebook feed later, we are joined here with Michael Wallenfels from Artswa from the state of Washington, and we have Mel Tonasket. And I believe you are with the, are you with the Spokane tribe? No.
I'm on the Colville Tribal Council.
Oh, my apologies, sir. I'm sorry about that. There you go. So why don't you go ahead? Let's do a round of introductions here, and let's start with Mel and tell us your name, a little bit about yourself, and what we're going to talk about here.
Well, my name is Mel Tonasket, like I said, and I'm on the Colville Tribal Council again. I first got elected to the Tribal Council in 1970, so I've been off and on in Indian politics for a long time. I was also elected president of what's called the National Congress of American Indians, with an office in Washington, D.C., that represented all of the federally recognized tribes and Alaskan Natives.
Wow.
I was on the American Indian Policy Review Commission, Senate and Congressional Commission, looking at relationships between federal, state, and tribes. I was on the State Board of Health for 6 years. I've been I retired from I retired from the tribe at one time, and I wound up running the Indian health clinics. I was a clinic administrator on the Colville Indian Reservation, and I retired from that too. And so now I'm back on the Tribal Council again. A friend of mine passed away, and who was on the council, and I was put on to finish his term. So here I am back again, and through that history is when I met Billy Frank.
Okay. And then, so let's go ahead and introduce Michael and tell us who you are and what you're doing here. And
You had to let Mel go first.
right? Yeah, follow that up.
Yeah, I'll follow that. So my name is Michael Wallenfels. I work for the Washington State Arts Commission. We are also known as Artswa. I do communications for the agency for going on about 3 years now. And, we're a busy agency. We have an art and public places program, arts and education, grants to organizations. And we've added a couple new programs just recently, wellness arts in the military and tribal cultural affairs. So we're growing a very busy agency. And one of the most interesting and meaningful projects that's underway right now is the statue for Billy Frank Jr. So that's something I know we'll talk about the details later, but I'm working very closely with the communication teams at Nisqually Indian Tribe to tell the story about Billy and to tell the story about this statue and why having a statue of someone like Billy Frank Jr. in Washington, D.C. is a really important thing, and that this statue that's being made is a once in every few generations opportunity for folks to know about. So,
Wow.
Honored to be here.
Wow. So, Mel, let's just jump right in. Tell us who Billy Frank Jr. was, and sort of the story behind him and what happened there.
Well, Billy Frank, he really wasn't an elected tribal leader for his tribe, but he was a leader during the fish, that was called the Fish Wars. He truly believed that their treaty authorized and allowed them to take fish, salmon specifically, and the river ran right by his property, his dad's property, and still does. And so he started fishing. His dad started fishing, and eventually it got into a conflict. The commercial fishermen out in the ocean and in the Sound was really opposed to them taking fish in the river. And it got to be such a conflict that Billy had been beat up by the state game wardens.
Physically beat up.
Physically beat up.
Wow.
Head banged, boats rammed. He was thrown in jail 50 times or so.
Over 50 is what
And
family tells us.
yeah, and when
Wow.
he'd get out of jail, him and his people would go right back out on the river because they were committed that that's their treaty rights. And when I was a new chairman I got to be the chairman the first time in 1971. And so we kind of kept following all of the different Indian kind of activities around the country. And when I started hearing about Billy and his efforts to fight for his people's right to take salmon according to their treaty, and I want to add this into it because most people don't think about it or maybe don't even know. You got to look at the United States Constitution. This is the basics. The United States Constitution says that the United States can only treaty with another sovereign. Can't treaty with an organization. Can't treaty with a corporation. Only another sovereign. So when they negotiated treaties with tribes, according to the U.S. Constitution, it made recognized tribes as sovereigns. And that's where Billy Frank's mind and his family's mind went. It's a supreme law of the land level of a treaty. And so that's why he was willing to go out and do what he did on that river. And he did it for a number of years. And my tribe supported him. We heard one time that they were going to go out on the river. We had known that he got beat up numbers of times and thrown in jail, and they was going to go out on the river again. So I asked my tribal council if they'd be willing to go over and go along the bank, stationed along the bank to be witnesses to whatever the state did, so that if we could go to court and be his witness, we would do that. And my whole tribal council went over.
Oh, wow.
And so when Billy heard that, that really brought us even closer together.
Yeah.
So he's my hero. He was one of my heroes.
Yeah. And so you took part in this with him. You were part of this whole thing. You watched.
I didn't get beat up, but my council was along the river to be witnesses if we needed to be witnesses. If we were called, we could witness. And it just happened to be the one day that we went out along the banks, they meaning the state didn't attack, but they had. And there's films, there's newsreels, there's films, there's a documentary that shows Billy getting beat up. There's shows the women of his family and of his tribe getting thrown on the ground by state game wardens and drug up from the banks to be thrown in jail.
Wow.
There's films of that, and most of the people in the state, I think, don't even realize what was going on then. It got so bad that there was even signs over there, spear an Indian and save a salmon. Yeah, I mean,
holy cow.
It was a war. And when you think about Billy's life living through that, one of the things that makes him my hero, and I've been in this a long time, you don't find people that will get beat up that many times, get thrown in jail that many times, see their family members beat up, thrown in jail, their women dragged up by the hair and thrown in jail, and then still keep an open mind and an open heart to eventually work together.
Wow.
And I think that this statue and the recognition that he's getting today, and has been for a while, he's got a park named after him right off of I-5 over there, that it shows the kind of character that Billy was. And there's not many people like that in any leadership that I know of.
Right. Yeah. What was the time period of all this when all this was happening during the fish wars?
In the 70s and 80s.
Okay. And
then eventually it was taken into federal court, and a Judge Bolt was his name, ruled in that the tribes had the right to take 50% of the available salmon. And so then basically the wars were over. The state couldn't come in and act like they were acting. I mean, when we'd go over there, when Indians would just get together over around Olympia, they would have cops up on the buildings taking pictures of all of us, seeing who was involved or who was supportive. And so you was always walking around, even though we're from Colville over here, Spelem, Omak, Enchelium, because we supported. We were watched too. I mean, it was a big issue, and so to go from that era to where Billy is recognized today, and the fishing rights are recognized today, is a distance in time that is, to me, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. I would imagine it's almost. I would imagine there's almost a bittersweetness to it. I mean, it's had to go through all that, and then, you know, when he was right in the first place.
He was.
Yeah,
He
you
was.
know,
He was. I was telling Mike before we came in that there's two warriors that in Indian country that I really admired, and Billy was one of them, and another one was Bernie White Bear, who was a Colville tribal member that occupied Fort Lawton over in Seattle. It eventually won, and he was getting beat up and thrown in jail all the time too.
Wow.
And there's a lot of us leaders will talk a big story, we'll go on the press, we'll go lobby, but are we willing to get our heads busted and get thrown in jail time after time for that cause? And I've been around Billy after it was all settled, and I've seen him in Washington, D.C. working on like the Canadian fishing with the United States and the tribes, making sure tribes are involved in however that division of fish is between U.S. and Canada and the tribes. I've seen him walking in the halls of Congress over there many times, and you know, always had a smile. He'd go into a senator's office and they'd, "Hi, Billy, how are you doing?" Instead of that sneery, you know, "you beat me up" look.
Yeah.
He was an amazing man.
It sounds like he was well liked by them there too.
He was well liked in the Senate and well liked in the House, and particularly well liked eventually in state capital, our state capital here in Washington State, or they wouldn't be doing the statue.
Right.
Right. And because of that history and knowing him, shaking his hand, giving him his hugs, that's why I came here today, so that the public can know of a man and his people and his family that was willing to sacrifice that.
Wow. Wow. So, I'm sorry. I'm still kind of absorbing all this. It's a lot to take in. You know, you talked about the times he was physically fighting. How long did this drag out in the courts through this whole thing? I mean, it seems like
How many years? It was years.
The Bolt decision just celebrated its 50th this year. So the Bolt decision came in 1974, but the Bolt decision was not the end of fighting for rights.
right.
I mean, that fight's still not done.
No, there's still a long way to go there, just for rights, all the rights in general. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell us how the statue came about.
Yeah, I can jump in and talk a bit about that. But one thing I did want to ask about, Mel, see if you had experience with this. A lot of the people who knew Billy, who worked with him from like the congressional or legislative side of things, always like to talk about how he had kind of colorful language. It wasn't just a smile. It was like a Jesus Christ, how the hell are you?
That was a little even harder than that. Can I say it?
No, not on the air, please. I got an oopsie button here in case you do.
I'll be blankety blank. How are you? Right?
Yeah. Nice.
But with a big smile. And he'd do the same thing to a senator or a congressman.
Yeah, and there were jokes
That's
early on that we should have some of that language on the pedestal for the statue. But to talk about the origins of the statue, it really begins with Statuary Hall, which was founded in the mid-19th century. It's housed in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And the whole notion behind Statuary Hall is that the states in the Union could each send two statues of people that they felt were, you know, their proudest representatives of their state. And it wasn't until about 2000 that they passed another set of legislation to let states change who was representing them. So from 1850 or so up until 2000, you're kind of stuck with who, people generations ago had decided represented the state.
Right.
And our state has changed a lot. Our country has changed a lot since then. But I mean, I have to tell you, we took a trip out there to Washington, D.C. with then Chairman Frank, who is the son of Billy Frank Jr., Willie Frank III, with the artist Haiying Wu, and we were led on a tour of Statuary Hall by the curator, the architect of the Capitol. And our country's legacy is still there, enshrined in the artwork. It's really, I mean, some of it is beautiful, but a lot of it is horrifying. There are
Right.
some friezes of conquest, and there are statues of Confederate generals. There are a lot of representations of what's dark and troubling about our history.
Right.
But to come forward to this statue, in 2021, Representative Deborah Lekanoff introduced a bill to send Billy back to Washington, D.C. And the notion was that it's time to replace a statue, and if it's going to be anybody, it should be Billy. And the legislation passed unanimously. In fact,
Really?
there was no obstruction. There was, in fact, enthusiasm, and that
Outstanding.
speaks to what Mel was talking about. That this man, that his spirit of camaraderie and collaboration is just resounding years and years after his death. And so that legislation passed, and that set in motion, a whole bunch of activities, assembling a committee to select an artist, setting up a fund to pay for the costs related to the statue. And the first role of the committee was to select an artist, and they selected Haiying Wu, who is a renowned Chinese-American artist. As it happens, he's going to be the first Asian-American artist to have a statue in Statuary Hall.
Wow.
It was really interesting because when he gave his proposal, the committee, there were gasps. These people that had known and worked with Billy and loved him. Just this drawing that Haiying had made, they felt like they were looking at their friend again. And since then, this committee meets every quarter. And we talk about the progress of the statue. A lot of it is maybe very dry. We do budget updates, but we also have really exciting stories to tell about things like this. The fact that we are taking the maquette on tour and bringing it around the state to make sure that as many Washingtonians as possible know about this man and know about what he accomplished, know about what his struggle was. And that's why we're here today. I'm really honored, Mel, that you were able to join us for this conversation because I learned about him after he passed and have just been hearing story after story. But to hear from someone who knew him and got to see him doing everything that was consequential about his life it's an honor to be here with you.
It really is. Thank you for coming. And I remember this. I grew up I was in the Tri-Cities as a kid in the 80s, and I remember, these stories and this sort of, like you talk about, this contention between the fisheries, and growing up in a not commercial, but sport fishing family. I remember hearing the back and forth sort of between these two sides, and I remember it was a pretty contentious issue back in the day, and it's amazing to see this man that got this stuff accomplished honored like this. It's pretty incredible, and not even just to see him honored, but to see the change happening in how he's perceived and what the things he's done and accepted. It's really great to just sort of see the progress that's happened with all this, and to recognize it for the accomplishment it was. That's fantastic.
If it's fantastic for you, it's more fantastic
Oh.
even for me
I
because
can
I was
imagine.
lucky enough to live through it.
I can't even imagine.
I got to touch him, hug him,
Right.
tease him. He got to cuss at me a little bit every once in a while when I seen him, but and then to be able, his son was the chairman too, and just got beat about a month or so ago out of the chairmanship of his tribe.
Oh,
So I got to work with his boy too, who had the same drive, the same compassion that his daddy had, and grandpa had, and it's in their blood. I mean, they're a little tiny tribe on a little tiny river, and but their heart is as big as any biggest reservation you could have. I mean,
Oh, wow.
you read about people like Sitting Bull and Chief Joseph and Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get to meet somebody that is in your lifetime that can lead an influence like that is I couldn't have asked for a better time to live, because I got to see some really great leaders, and I got to see leaders pull together and stick together on some of these major issues, right?
Right.
I mean, another example, my tribe, because I was more involved over on the coast than my council, and we had heard that some of the banks were pulling together, some of the big banks were pulling together, trying to be mediators between the state and Billy and his people. So I called Billy and I said, "Is this something that you asked for, you want? Where's that coming from?" He said, "No," with some colorful language.
And did you say banks?
Banks.
Banks.
Sea First Bank, Rainier Bank, and one
Just-
other big bank.
Just because the CEOs personally had a vested interest, or with their financial interest?
Whatever reason, I never asked. So I told my tribal council, Billy Frank don't want this.
Mm-hmm.
He's not asking for this. So we had all of our money in Sea First Bank,
Mm-hmm.
and so they told me call the bank and say get out of the fish negotiation stuff, or we're going to move your money.
Yeah.
So I called them and I said, better get out of that. Billy Frank isn't asking for this. So if you don't get out, we're going to move our money.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave them like a month. They didn't move. They didn't get out. So we moved all of our money
Wow.
to a little bank over on this side of the mountains. And when other tribes heard that, they started pulling their monies out of those three banks too.
Hmm.
So, and Billy knows that that's the kind of support he had around the Northwest. And he wasn't even a chairman. He was a fisherman. He was a leader among leaders,
Yep.
right? And that's the kind of influence that he had.
Well, and that makes sense, because you see big money getting behind some of these things, and it
Yeah.
raises eyebrows, and it's probably not the image you want behind some of these movements, because it wasn't
No.
about money. It was about your livelihoods.
Usually in Indian country,
Yeah.
it's always us against money, us
Mhm.
meaning tribes against money. Say we don't use up I'll give you an example. We don't use up all of our land. We had a big reservation, and they found silver over around Loomis,
Mm-hmm.
and so they took half of our reservation to develop the silver business. And then they found gold up around Republic, and they took the other half of what we had left for that. So we're down to a quarter of what we originally had as a reservation, and that was over money, right?
Wow.
Money. Indians aren't using it. Indians don't need it, so we'll take it.
We're just going
You
to take
find
it.
the same argument over water today,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's federal litigation that says tribes have certain rights to water. Well, our theory of water is you save it for future generations.
Right.
In the non-Indian legal world, it's use it or lose it. That's the way it is in state court. Either use the water or lose it. Somebody else needs it more than you. It's so in the world that I've been in since 1970, it's always us competing with money interests.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily a bank. It could be a company. You're going to see more of the fights, I think, over energy. you
Yeah.
know,
That's
over
definitely
windmills,
coming.
over solar farms that are taking up a lot of land. That and it's because of money, big money interests. And so there's Billy. He was going up against a big commercial fisheries,
Mm-hmm.
right? Little tiny tribe, little tiny membership
Yeah.
on a little tiny reservation going up against commercial fisheries.
And remind us
When-
again which tribe Billy was from.
He's
Nisqually.
Nisqually,
Nisqually. Okay.
right? Just it's between Fort Lewis and Olympia.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Again, it's incredible to we can't, from our perspective, understand some of these things that have happened and gone through, and it's hard to imagine just having to fight for water rights and having all this stuff taken away. It makes me angry for you, I guess. I'm sorry, but
Well,
yeah,
in our opinion,
yeah,
I'll say ours from the tribal
Mm-hmm.
opinion. Since I've been involved regionally, Northwest, I've been involved nationally. It's not just for us,
yeah,
because whatever happens to us is going to happen to the non-Indian world around us, right?
yep,
So look at our environment.
yeah,
It's not only us fighting for save water for the environment, and that ain't only helping us, it helps our neighbors.
yep,
And that's how we look at stuff. There's this might sound strange, but there was some old people was getting together up along the Canadian border years ago when I was a young guy. And they were talking about manifest destiny.
mm-hmm.
Manifest destiny was one day there's not going to be any more Indians. Under Andrew Jackson's presidency, his policy was to exterminate all of the Indians. Exterminate.
Right,
And then we went through termination under President Eisenhower's term, to pass a law that says you're not a tribe anymore and your land isn't a reservation anymore. It's like a corporate land and taxable.
right,
And that failed at wherever they did it. Well, so manifest destiny. And the old people was saying, there's a reason we're still here. By all odds, we shouldn't be here. We don't have the numbers to fight. We don't have navies and air forces, none of that stuff to fight. How are we still here? And they came to the conclusion that we're here to save this world. That was their thinking. We're here to save the water. We're here to save the forest. We're here to save the wildlife. And when you think about that in the big picture, everybody benefits from it, right?
absolutely,
Everybody benefits. So when our tribe is fighting Tekkaminko, for example, up in Canada, that is dumping poisons in the Columbia River, that's just not helping the Colville tribe or the Spokane tribe or the tribes along the river. It's helping everybody that lives along that river or relies on that river.
right,
And that's how our world has to think about. And that's where Billy came in. Tell the story, tell the story, tell the story, because the story is, if we pull together, we can make great things happen. And so my job is to follow up with Billy, tell the story.
mm-hmm. I love that.
And it's a really nice connection to the statue because do you know what's going to be written on the statue right there?
Tell the story.
Tell your story.
Tell your story.
Yeah, so that's going to be on the pedestal. It's going to have, what everything has: Billy's name, the state, the years of his lifespan. It's also going to have his name in Lashutsi,
Okay.
and it's going to say "Tell your story," for all the reasons Mel was just saying.
Very cool. And what was that, Lashutsi? Is that
That's their language.
okay?
Lashutsi, yeah.
Okay. Are there many people left? Because we had a conversation earlier with Monica Tonasket, and one of the languages is one of the subjects that came up, and how the Salish. There's very few people speaking Salish. Even when they were trying to teach it, they were only teaching very basic
Yeah.
Salish. Is that a language that is in danger? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because it was, she probably said it too.
Mhm.
It wasn't allowed to be spoken, right? It just
Mhm.
when our people went through all of these young children being required and being taken from their families and put in boarding schools around the country, first thing, cut their hair and couldn't talk their language. That's the first thing.
Oh.
So great-grandparents, my great-grandparents and my grandparents were in that situation.
Wow.
I'm 84, so I know their stories.
Right.
It's not just hearsay. I know their stories. And then you have all our old people. When they'd talk, they'd have to hide and talk. Even around home or in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we lost a lot of our dialect. A lot of our old traditional people are gone, and so I think every tribe that I know is really working hard to bring their languages back
Yeah.
because it's different. Our language is pictures, not
Mm-hmm.
just words, right? And that's how it's described to me.
Okay. Yeah, it seems almost like, for every person that knows it, they right now they're gonna have to teach 10 people just to keep it
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah.
And it's getting people to learn and hope. And it seems like a lot of the younger people are really taking a lot of initiative
Yeah.
and wanting to learn these languages
Yeah.
and bring them back.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. Again, talking with Monica earlier, she said that a lot of these younger people are the ones teaching it now.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones learning it and taking it on. Her son knows more Salish than she does.
My grandkids know more
Yeah.
than I know, too.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a note on that. When we did a trip up with then Chairman Frank and the artist, we visited with Senator Murray,
Mm-hmm.
and Willie pulled out his phone and played a recording of his grandfather telling a story in Lashutsi about Tohoma. And then he talked about the language keepers and that they, just like you were saying, it's these youngest generations that are doing this and keeping the language, not only in this quality, but I know we at our agency, we just launched this Tribal Cultural Affairs program. They just put out their first round of grants, and there's at least one project they're funding that is a dictionary, a language book and studies. And
Nice.
it's definitely in danger, like Mo was saying, but these generations are coming to pick it up.
Yep. I know. I grew up in Alaska, and there was a lot of the the village schools that, in my lifetime, have overturned. They still had these laws that they weren't allowed to speak
Yeah.
their native languages in the schools, and these were in their communities. These were actually in the villages. And then in my lifetime, they've, I remember being in school, they overturned those laws and actually had the schools teach in their native languages. So every child that went through those schools was bilingual. They learned English and their native language, which I think is so important, so wonderful. And there's a bunch of the Native Alaskan languages anyway that have actually been brought back. That there's quite a few people speaking some of these languages now that were nearly extinct. And I can imagine, up there they didn't quite have so much of the, I guess, the oppressive influence that they've had down here in the States.
Well,
I mean, it still exists for sure, but they're kind of more isolated, and even to have that affect them so much.
in my opinion, there was a time in our history where the federal government developed a relocation program. They were going to help civilize the Indians again. And that relocation program was taking young people away from their villages, their communities, and putting them into cities like L.A., San Francisco, Seattle, to learn trades. But there was no program developed to bring them back to apply those trades. So we lost a lot of our young people. Alaska lost a lot of their young people.
Yeah.
To the lower 48 under the relocation program.
And I'm assuming these were not voluntary
No,
relocations.
No.
No. Wow.
no. And they lost a lot of the young people to a BIA boarding school down in Chamawa, Oregon, right by Salem. Because when we had a lot of Colvilles going to that school, there was a lot of Alaska natives going there too. And you'd see a lot of them around Seattle. I mean, it was kind of a joke. To me, it was a sick joke, but an example is this Alaskan native was told, when you go downtown, if you get lost, just call and we'll help you get back, right, to wherever. And so he called, and they said, "Where you at?" He says, "Oh, I'm on the corner of Walk and Don't Walk." right? Because
Yeah.
they didn't have walk and don't walk signs up in their native villages,
Right.
right? That's the signs that he saw,
Yeah.
and other Indians would make fun of him, but that's kind of
Well, I mean, if you've never seen it before, that's what the
yeah,
sign says.
yeah, yeah.
Huh.
I mean, I was married to a white woman, and she'd have done that too. You know?
Yeah. I do know sort of some of this, some of the disparities. It was like I said again. I grew up in Alaska, and we had in our schools growing up. You look next to you, and there's going to be in every classroom probably at least a few Native Alaskan kids in the classroom with
Yeah.
you. We learned a lot, about the stories of the grandmother and the raven, and these were stories that were learned in school,
Yeah.
and we had people come in and speak. And to leave Alaska and have my own children, especially coming to areas like this where we're surrounded with reservations and these other cultures, and there's this void in our schools, and the kids aren't, our kids, the non-tribal kids are not learning this stuff. And it seemed kind of appalling to me that we're surrounded by all these rich cultures and not being taught their stories. And I'd really love to see that change.
I think in general, and not just the local stories, but real history.
Yeah.
Right? There's more than Lewis and Clark and
Yep.
Pocahontas and Sacagawea. There's real history.
Yep.
I mean, they don't even teach it, I think, good enough in law schools. They don't teach it enough in English classes. They don't in psychology and sociology, because there's that. It leaves a big lack of understanding why. For example, one of the big questions: how can there be a nation within a nation? How can a tribe be a sovereign nation within the United States? That's really hard to understand because it's not taught,
Right.
right? It's nothing to be afraid of.
No.
And if it was really taught, what I found out when I was working in the national level with the American Indian Policy Review Commission, there's not another nation, dominant nation in the whole world that has a trust treaty relationship with its Aboriginal people like the United States does. We're unique in
Yeah.
our federal legal relationship because of the treaties. I know that the Australia, those Aboriginal people are
Right.
looking. I know that even Laplanders from Norway, Sweden, and Denmark are looking. They're going through the white people, blue eyes, going through the same kind of situations when they're following their herds in those migrations of their different countries taking their babies and keeping them in boarding schools. They're losing their language. They're losing their songs. They're losing their medicine, their power.
Right.
I don't mean like pill medicine. I mean
No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
that spiritual medicine.
Exactly.
They're going through the same thing. I mean, we met with them when we was working to get a non-governmental seat in the United Nations, which we did when I was with the National Congress of American Indians. So we know that not another nation in the world has this special relationship like the United States has. Instead of being proud of it, it's not taught.
Right.
And that leaves this void of understanding and trust between people that don't need to be there, right? Don't need to be there.
No,
And
we're all in
there's-
this together.
And there's not enough of us going around preaching it.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
And some of the stories are, again, this came up earlier. Some of the stories are not, they're not easy stories. They're not easy conversations to have. But if we don't have them,
Yeah,
we're never going to get anywhere.
yeah,
We're never gonna get past those barriers that have been put up.
yeah,
Yeah. That speaks to something that's felt increasingly evident the longer I've worked on this project, is that to know and learn Billy's story is to learn the story of this entire country
Yeah.
and its future as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and that's part of why we wanted to bring to that the opportunity that this project, the development of this statue, is more than just deciding to do it, making it, and sending it to D.C.
Right.
Right? It's telling everybody that we're about to celebrate somebody who changed Washington's course for the better.
Right.
And this is why, and this is where it's going. And so, I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't tell the folks listening that they can come down and see this representation of Billy at the Trails End Gallery through Saturday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We've got a piece called a maquette, which is a term of art. Basically means it's a half-scale model of eventually the statue will be 9 feet and cast in bronze atop a 2-foot pedestal, so it'll be 11 feet. And so this model that's at Trails End right now was made by the artist Hyung Woo, and it's kind of his proof of concept. This is what I want to do, and he had to make it to get approval from the architect of the Capitol. So come and see it and learn about this man.
Now, do you know where in the this is my own curiosity? Do you know where in the hall it's going to be located? Who it's going to be next to?
Yeah.
Do you?
Oh yeah.
Who's it going to be next to?
Well, the statue he's replacing is Marcus Whitman.
Okay.
So in the
Is that
legislation,
the
Marcus
Whitman from Whitman University?
Yeah, so
Okay.
one of the statues will come back to Walla Walla. The other's most likely going to come back to the Washington State Historical Society. But where Billy will be placed is in where Marcus is right now, flanking along with Chief Standing Bear from Nebraska, the entrance to the Hall of Representatives. So
Very cool.
all our representatives are going to have to pass by Billy and Chief Standing Bear on their way in to do their work.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things is that Billy's going to be the first contemporary Indian in Statuary Hall. All the other folks that are in there now are historical figures. They're generally in full regalia.
Mm-hmm.
Billy's going to be there in his cowboy boots.
Yep. And I haven't gone over there yet to look at it. I need to get over there this evening and go check it out. I've seen photos of the maquette, and it looks warm and inviting, and you can tell that he's a friendly light, just from his pose and his stature. He just feels like he's inviting you in and saying hi, and probably shouting some obscenities at you, and good-natured obscenities. You told those stories, and thinking about the images I've seen of that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can totally see that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, he's working on the full-scale statue now, and Mel, you've got some notes for him, right? You want to make sure that he gets that face right.
Yeah. I used to do a lot of portrait work, drawing though. I never was in sculpt. But when I was going to D.C. a lot, and you get spoiled easy because when you're in national position, free rooms, free booze if you want, free dinners, and I didn't want to be spoiled, so I had to think of a way that would keep me. Why am I still here?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started looking at old faces, old Indian faces, and that faraway look that they had.
Yeah.
And I got some in my phone, so I started drawing old Indian portraits
Okay.
to remind me the importance of why I'm here, what did they live through so that we could still be here. And so when I look at a face, I'm looking at detail, right? I mean, I'm really into detail and eyes, and that's what I was saying. If I wish I knew how to do sculpting as good as I could do pencil drawings, but it's going to be neat. I think I have faith that it's going to be a good one.
So the representation so far, does it pass the mustard? Does it pass the
I don't want to
test?
say nothing bad. You won't let me cuss. No, I wouldn't cuss about it anyway. No, it's close.
Yeah.
It's
Very
close.
good.
But if it's going to be in bronze in the United States Capitol, it has to be perfect, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
You look at some of those other statues, they're perfect. I
Yep.
mean, right down to detail, they're perfect, and that's what I hope is going to happen with Billy.
Yeah. I would hope so. I hope the people approving the project would accept nothing less.
Yeah, let Mel look at it.
Yeah, it's got to pass the Mel test.
Does it? We should have you around more often, and then we could just sort of institute your values to everything we do here, and then just ask ourselves if we ever catch ourselves slipping, would Mel approve?
Mel-
Yeah. So that about wraps it up for our hour. Mel, you came in here and you said I can't talk for an hour. It's been an hour.
I had to talk about all kinds of other stuff, didn't I?
No, that's okay. That's why we're here. That's good. So any parting words before we head out here for the evening?
Yeah, I want to let everybody know that like they can follow along with this project if they head to arts.wa.gov. They can find we've got a whole set of pages about this. We're working with Children of the Setting Sun. They're an indigenous-led production company out of Bellingham. They're making a whole series of videos about this whole project, and they've released 2 so far. And we're also
I've
inviting
heard of them. Yeah.
they're fantastic to work with, and we're inviting people to tell their story of knowing Billy, of working with Billy, or if they didn't know him, getting inspired by Billy. And we're starting to put those up on our website too. We've got a lesson plan for educators if they want to build this into their curriculum. And Haing is working at South Puget Sound Community College, and if you come down to Olympia, you can come and be in the workspace with him. You can right now, if you went, you could come and put clay on the model.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and be part of this history right now. And so we want people to know about this, to get excited, to get involved, so that come or probably May of next year when we're installing these statues, everybody's up to date and is thrilled that this is happening.
Okay, so you just said a date. What is the actual? Is there an actual date yet for the installation?
It has not been set. There's
Okay.
still a little too many variables. When will the statue be finished? How long will it take to cast it in bronze? How long will it take to ship? But we're hoping for May of this year. Originally, we had hoped for Billy Frank Jr. Day, which is March 9th.
Yeah.
That's Billy's birthday. That is a holiday here in Washington State. But it's going to take a little bit longer because the artist said, he's like, this needs to take as long as it takes to do it right.
Exactly. All right. Well, that's our time for today. So thank you guys so much once again for coming in. And we got lots of stuff happening. Don't forget tonight is the art walk that's going to happen around town. You can visit the Billy Frank Jr. maquette at the Trails End Gallery. It's going to be there from 6 to 8 p.m. this evening. And then once that's over with, you can mosey on down to the park where we're going to be unveiling the David Goverdare, one of his most famous sculptures in the park. There's going to be live music in the park. Debuted on the Creative District's brand new sound system that was just installed. That is for the public use. It's now part of our stage in the park. Now has its very own sound system that lives there. So we're gonna debut that tonight. We're gonna do the unveiling of the horse. We got people here from Artswa and the Creative District convening. It's an exciting week. Lots of stuff going on. So everyone should head on down there, check it out. I do have one quick note. There was going to be a beer garden, or there was going to be beer served there, but that is no longer the case. The event actually, it's a good thing. The original permit for that party is no longer going to cover the size that this event has grown, which I, for one, am thrilled about. Beer, no beer, I don't care. I'm just happy to be doing this event tonight and unveiling this piece to the public. So if anyone was expecting, you might want to stop into one of our local businesses here before or after and have a drink there, and then head on down to the park. So, but there will be tacos and sodas and music in the park. It's going to be very exciting. We got fire dancers in the park. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, don't miss the gallery. Come see Billy.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to go on about that, but that was, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very
All right.
much.
Thank you so much, and everybody, thank you so much for listening to KCHW 102.7, Your Northern Lights Public Radio.